The room is a sensitive, compartmented information facility with no windows and controlled access at the door. An internal, air-gapped recording system is active under Program Security Officer authority. Its red status light steady in the corner. Fluorescent light flattens gray walls and a steel table bolted to the floor. And the air smells faintly of cleaner and warm circuitry. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole of the United States Marine Corps sits in service bravos with chevrons on her sleeves. Her hands rest calm on the steel, fingers flat, shoulders square. She breathes in for 4, hold, out for 6, steady enough to keep the pulse down and the mind clear. And her boots are polished, blouse pressed, name tape centered above the pocket. Lieutenant General Richard Halden leads the questioning from the presiding seat. He demands an on-the-record statement regarding individual kinetic effects attributable to her role during the last joint deployment, citing policy and procedure with careful, unhurried cadence. His tone is controlled and meant to pin her answers to policy. Eyes stay steady. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene watches without speaking, posture aligned and ready to intervene if compartmented lines are crossed. Authority tied to a special access program can supersede rank inside the compartment when need-to-know boundaries apply. The air feels tight, but rules are tighter. Avery keeps her eyes level and her breathing even, the fluorescent buzz counting the seconds in the background. Pens still. Chairs stop moving, and the room listens as the red light records every breath. Precise. 73. The sensitive compartmented information facility has no windows and a single controlled entry monitored by armed security at all times. A posted notice at the door forbids personal electronics and explains inspection procedures for anyone crossing the threshold at entry. An internal air-gapped recording system is active under Program Security Officer authority, with indicators visible to staff inside room. Termination can be ordered immediately if compartmented lines are brushed, returning the space to closed discussion protocols by proper authority. Lieutenant General Richard Halden sits at the presiding position. Posture forward. Papers aligned square. Pen centered on the pad today. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene is offset to the side in an observer posture, attentive and still, eyes tracking procedural boundaries. Navy Judge Advocate General officers line one flank, sanitized folders ready, tabs minimal, pens poised for precise entries and timestamps. Across the table sit personnel from United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy. Uniforms, immaculate, and insignia, correct. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole wears service bravos with chevrons on the sleeves. Boots polished. Ribbons minimal by deliberate redaction policy. Her bearing is set to neutral and professional. Hands quiet on steel. Gaze level. Breathing even within practiced cadence today. The furniture and lighting make the space feel clinical and procedural, not hostile, while camera placement reinforces controlled observation throughout. Quiet rules govern every action. Need to know shapes every question, and voices sit low to prevent accidental disclosure today. Inside a special access program, authority attached to the compartment can supersede rank, and everyone present understands the boundary exactly. Body language carries the judgment. Arms fold, pens hover, and chairs angle slightly toward the presiding seat without spoken cue. Avery Cole raised her right hand, young and stubborn, and found a home in the United States Marine Corps. The path was not glamorous. It was early mornings, long miles, and instructors who cared more about consistency than inspiration. She learned to double-check straps on rucks and harness points, then check them again. She kept gears squared away, labels aligned, buckles seated, and batteries rotated by date. Small habits saved time, and sometimes they saved skin when pressure made hands clumsy. Her evaluations used the quiet phrases professionals respect: reliable, calm under pressure. Supervisors wrote that she followed orders, accepted responsibility, and maintained standards without prompting. And they left out color when color would have meant more than the work required. Later, official redactions turn pages into blank space by design, inside special access program, and sensitive compartmented information channels. Ribbons remained minimal because policy demanded silence, not because effort was missing. The absence read like nothing to some, but it recorded everything to the people who knew. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole speaks only within authorization. She respects read-in boundaries and keeps to need to know, never naming units, operations, aircraft, or weapons beyond what has already been stated. When pressure climbs, she rides a simple cadence. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. She wears service bravos with chevrons on the sleeves, posture neutral, voice plain, and boots that pass inspection without comment. Address is formal, and she answers to Staff Sergeant when called. In her world, respect is earned by doing the same right thing every single time. She does not chase attention. She cares about clean process and repeatable results that hold when adrenaline scrambles thought and the clock reads 2:30 p.m. or 3:15 a.m. Proof lives in habit, not in stories told. The sensitive compartmented information facility holds a chill that is not about temperature. Colonels fold their arms and settle back with shoulders squared, eyes steady as if waiting for a checklist item to fail. Navy Judge Advocate General officers poise pens over sanitized folders and mark time with small, careful taps. Junior officers mirror the room without being told. Notebooks open to blank lines. Caps click on and off, and chairs angle toward the presiding seat by habit. A low rustle rides the fluorescent buzz like air moving through ducts that everyone pretends not to hear during long mornings and longer afternoons. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole sits in service bravos with chevrons on the sleeves and polished boots planted square. Hands rest quiet on steel, eyes level, and the cadence is in for 4. Hold. Out for 6. The breathing is not dramatic, only a metronome for discipline. Minimal ribbons draw quick conclusions. A redacted file does the rest, offering clean spaces for favoritism or failure depending on who squints at the gaps. In a place ruled by need to know, absence on paper often means the work lives where paper cannot follow. Lieutenant General Richard Halden remains composed at the head, reading posture more than words. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene stays slightly offset, still and watchful, the way a range safety officer watches a line. Ready to call a halt if the boundary gets brushed under posted SCIF procedures and program security officer authority. Neither needs volume to project control. Hostility would be simple. This is institutional dismissal, the quiet kind that reduces a person to forms and timing blocks while pens hover for a misstep. Silence becomes absence to the untrained ear. Though here it is discipline shaped by special access program rules and read-in limits today. Lieutenant General Richard Halden opens the session inside the sensitive compartmented information facility with a measured cadence and a clean stack of papers. The tone is procedural and exact, shaped by policy rather than personality. The room settles as if a checklist has begun. He reviews dates and movements for timeline anomalies and pauses at overlaps that do not map to open reporting. He asks for clarity on command relationships that appear to shift without public explanation. The language stays joint and clinical. Halden distinguishes between attached status, operational control, and tactical control, and he checks whether responsibilities match the authority granted. He seeks explicit role clarity within each frame of control. The questions land like ticks on a clock. Navy Judge Advocate General officers track each exchange with timestamps and minimal notes. Pens pause when answers touch the edge of a compartmented wall. Folders remain sanitized and closed unless a precise reference is required. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole answers inside authorization and keeps her breathing in for 4. Hold. Out for 6. She uses the phrasing, "I am not authorized to discuss operational details," and repeats it when a question crosses a read-in boundary. Her posture is neutral and steady in service bravos, with chevrons on the sleeves. Halden reframes each narrow answer as evasive without raising his voice. He suggests that safe language can hide gaps and asks if accountability survives redaction. The pressure comes from policy, not volume. Avery stays within need to know and offers only what the rules allow. She confirms what can be confirmed and leaves the rest where it belongs. The exchange remains calm and exact, and the room feels the weight of the boundary more than the weight of the words. Lieutenant General Richard Halden narrows the aperture and turns each narrow answer into an absence. He cites performance language like competent, reliable, and calm under pressure as if it were a way to hide behind safe words. The cadence is measured, the pressure deliberate. He presses for specifics that live outside, read in boundaries. He asks for names that would not belong on this table and tries to map gaps to intent. The room hears the weight of his rank, even as policy holds the line. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole remains steady in service bravos with chevrons on the sleeves. Hands quiet on the steel, eyes level, breathing in for 4. Hold. Out for 6. She keeps her lane without raising her voice. She uses precise phrases that fit the compartment, including "I am not authorized to discuss operational details." When a question pushes further, she adds, "I will stay within my authorization." The wording is clean because the rules are clear. Navy Judge Advocate General officers follow each exchange with small marks and still hands. Sanitized folders stay closed unless a timestamp or policy reference is required. Their awareness says that policy, not attitude, shapes what can be said. Halden reframes restraint as dodge and asks if accountability can survive redaction. He suggests that safe language is a screen instead of a safeguard. He waits for hesitation and listens for a crack that does not come. Avery holds to need to know and refuses to speculate across a wall she is sworn to respect. Speaking beyond authorization would risk special access program and sensitive compartmented information violations, which she will not do. The room settles into a tighter silence as discipline is mistaken for evasion, and the push for a breach meets a surface that will not give. The hallway is part of the sensitive compartmented information facility, sealed and without windows. Badge-controlled doors click softly as people pass, and posted notices warn against personal electronics and casual conversation. The air feels filtered and dry, like a place designed to carry only what is needed. A paper cup of water rests on a side table near Staff Sergeant Avery Cole, and she does not touch it. Her right hand tightens once, then releases, the movement small enough to miss if you are not looking. She keeps the cadence that steadies her. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Navy Judge Advocate General personnel move with measured steps and low voices. Folders closed and edges square. A junior officer pauses long enough to adjust the cup within reach and then keeps moving without a word. The sound of shoes on tile sets the rhythm for a short recess that feels longer than it is. Lieutenant General Richard Halden and Rear Admiral Samuel Keene are off stage in this moment, their presence felt in the way everyone keeps to policy. The signs, the doors, and the silence mark the limits better than any speech could. Avery sits straight, breathes once more in that steady pattern, and lets the cup sit untouched as the hallway waits for the session to resume. Questioning resumes inside the sensitive compartmented information facility, under the same cool light and the same posted rules at the door. The room settles, but a new sharpness hangs in the air. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene shifts from passive observer to alert assessor. Shoulders square, hands resting but ready. Generic phrasing brushes close to compartmented boundaries, with mentions of night insertion protocols and maritime interdiction operations left intentionally vague. A Navy Judge Advocate General officer closes a sanitized folder without ceremony, the motion small and precise. A captain pauses mid-note, and a colonel straightens a spine that had been casual 10 minutes earlier. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole keeps service bravos neat and quiet, chevrons centered on each sleeve, boots that would pass any inspection. Her breathing holds the lane. In for 4, hold. Out for 6, and her answers stay within authorization. Lieutenant General Richard Halden continues in a measured voice that sounds like a checklist read at 2:30 p.m. He presses for clarity while his phrasing edges near a wall that only red-in personnel are allowed to cross. Authority tied to a special access program can supersede rank inside a compartment when lines are approached. Everyone in the room understands that policy is not a suggestion and that posture will change the instant a boundary is touched. Keen's eyes track each imprecise edge, then settle on Avery with a look that measures discipline rather than doubt. The shift is not loud and it is not announced, but it is felt in every small movement. Pens float above paper, chairs stop their small adjustments, and breathing seems to sync with the hum in the ceiling. The question no longer feels like what Avery will say, but who has the right to ask it. Authority hangs over everything. The internal recording system comes back online under Program Security Officer Authority, air-gapped and verified. A red indicator glows in the corner, and the sensitive compartmented information facility feels smaller by design. The posted rules still hold, and the room adjusts to the quiet weight of being on record. Lieutenant General Richard Halden leans into procedure and issues a clear on-the-record demand. He specifies individual kinetic effects attributable to Staff Sergeant Avery Cole's role during her joint deployment, using precise terminology that avoids units and mission identifiers. The cadence is slow and exact. Like a checklist, read. Navy Judge Advocate General officers track every exchange with timestamps and tidy margins. Pens hover, then move in short strokes that capture only what policy allows. Rear Admiral Samuel Keen stays silent but alert, posture squared, prepared to act within Special Access Program authority if a compartmented line is crossed. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole sits steady in service bravos, with chevrons on each sleeve and boots ready for inspection. Her gaze is level, her hands quiet on steel, and her breathing stays in for 4. Hold. Out for 6. When pressed past a boundary, she answers with the phrase, "I am not authorized to discuss operational details." The demand to place a statement on the record changes the center of gravity in the room. Procedure carries weight equal to personality, and need-to-know boundaries become walls. Everyone understands that accuracy is required and that speculation is prohibited, even when the silence feels like defiance. Lieutenant General Richard Halden holds the pause until the air itself feels measured. Rear Admiral Samuel Keen watches the line, and the red light watches everything else. The focus narrows to the single request and settles at the edge where a number will be spoken. The red indicator glows in the corner, while the internal, air-gapped recording system runs under Program Security Officer authority. The sensitive compartmented information facility holds its chill with no windows and controlled access. Fluorescent light flattens gray paint and the steel table bolted to the floor. Lieutenant General Richard Halden sets the focus on the record and asks for a numerical statement tied to individual kinetic effects attributable to the last joint deployment. His phrasing is precise and clinical, trimmed of names and free of identifiers. The room gathers around the policy weight of the request. Navy Judge Advocate General officers track each line with tidy timestamps. Rear Admiral Samuel Keen stays silent, posture squared and alert, ready to act if compartmented lines are brushed. Pens hover, then touch paper only when the language stays inside need-to-know boundaries. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole sits in United States Marine Corps Service Bravos with chevrons on the sleeves. Her hands rest flat on the table and her eyes hold level. She breathes in for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Steady as a metronome in a room that favors restraint, Lieutenant General Richard Halden narrows the question to a single point and asks for the number itself. The fluorescent buzz seems to mark seconds with no movement. The red light holds steady while the recording system captures breath and posture and nothing else. Avery lifts her chin a fraction and answers quietly with the number in a flat professional tone. No pride and no apology and no elaboration follow. 73. Silence hangs a beat after the number lands, and the room seems to lean into it. Rear Admiral Samuel Keen rises from his chair with controlled intent. He exercises Program Security Officer authority tied to a special access program and takes the floor. He directs the internal recording system to terminate and declares the session compartmented under sensitive compartmented information rules. The instruction is plain and procedural, delivered flat. A technician hesitates for a heartbeat, then complies because authority inside a compartment supersedes rank within that space. The red indicators go dark on the wall and the air thins. Chairs slide back in controlled motions as personnel not read in prepare to depart. Badges are checked at the door, and a portion of the attendees file out under Need to Know. Navy Judge Advocate General officers gather sanitized folders with practiced hands. Tabs align, covers close, and pens clip back into pockets with quiet clicks. Process lives in the small things when sensitive compartmented information is in play. Lieutenant General Richard Halden remains seated and registers the shift without protest. The presiding posture stays formal, but control shifts to access and policy. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole holds steady in United States Marine Corps Service Bravos. Chevrons exact on sleeves, eyes level, hands calm on steel. Read in and read out become the only gates that matter, and every word now sits behind them. The room grows still as the compartment settles around those who remain. The new balance is simple. Policy speaks first, and the conversation proceeds inside its boundaries. The sensitive compartmented information facility is closed to open recording and feels smaller with only read-in personnel remaining. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene states with measured clarity that Lieutenant General Richard Halden is not read in and was not intended to be within this compartment. Keene affirms Program Security Officer authority over the session and places policy at the center of the room. He outlines that special access program controls, sensitive compartmented information rules, and need-to-know boundaries govern every word that follows and every action taken. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole is acknowledged as having served lawfully under Joint Command Authority. Her records are redacted by design, not by convenience, and the redactions protect lawful work that will not migrate into open files or routine evaluations. Her prior answers are recognized as maximum restraint within authorization. The operation exists inside a compartment that requires read-in status and program security officer oversight, and her discipline protected that boundary while still complying with the demands of the presiding process. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene directs that Avery be reassigned under his authority for follow-on duties aligned to access and mission need. He closes her current evaluation status and requires that any attempt to reopen it include written authorization from the proper program security officer or program manager. Navy Judge Advocate General officers remain as silent witnesses to a correction made by policy rather than favor. Sanitized folders are secured, tabs aligned, signatures captured where required, and custody notes updated in a manner consistent with sensitive compartmented information procedures. Badges are checked at the door as a portion of the attendance list departs under need-to-know rules. Chairs move in quiet arcs. Pens are clipped, and the room steadies as the compartment settles on those who hold access. Avery rises, renders a proper salute, and receives it in kind. Several officers stand of their own accord and then sit again without comment. Policy and access have reset the room, and Avery will move to her next duty without ceremony. 2 days later, the Pentagon conference room is bright and plain, with digital maps casting clean light across a long table. There is no public recording, only the quiet hum of systems and the careful rhythm of staff work on a calm morning. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene introduces Staff Sergeant Avery Cole with name, role, and reason for attendance. He does not speak of numbers or missions and keeps the frame on analysis and support to decision-making. Chairs settle. A United States Navy briefer advances a map layer and outlines indicators that tend to precede escalation, focusing on patterns that repeat in predictable ways when pressure builds. Avery remains composed in United States Marine Corps Service Bravos with chevrons on the sleeves and polished boots. She notes timing windows, baseline behavior, and the small deviations that matter when the clock reads 2:30 p.m. or 7:15 a.m. A Navy commander offers a respectful challenge on whether field experience truly translates to strategic forecasting. Avery answers in plain speech that it can, but only when ego is set aside and the data is allowed to contradict memory. The discussion stays clean and realistic. Participants refer to probability, signal to noise, and how to guard against confirmation bias without slipping into paralysis when action is required. Navy Judge Advocate General personnel observe the boundaries and keep sanitized folders closed. A staff officer holds the door. Someone nods thanks, and pens hover only when a conclusion needs capture rather than embellishment. Rear Admiral Samuel Keene addresses each point by tying observations to practical risk and resource posture. Lieutenant General Richard Halden is addressed correctly when referenced, and no one reaches beyond sensitive compartmented information limits. The tone is measured and professional. Respect arrives in quiet ways, in how questions are asked and how answers avoid drama while remaining useful to the task. The meeting ends without applause. Avery gathers her notes, offers a small nod to the room, and steps out with work to do. The same steady pace she brought into the building. Service that matters often happens where no one is looking. Staff Sergeant Avery Cole of the United States Marine Corps held the line inside rules shaped by special access program and sensitive compartmented information. Authority corrected the record without ceremony, and the room learned that access can be louder than rank. Small images carry what speeches cannot. The cadence stays steady. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Until the heart listens to its own pace again. Polished boots meet tile, and the hallway looks brighter even though the lights have not changed. Respect in uniform does not always arrive with noise. It grows from restraint, consistency, and duty carried on quiet shoulders over long days and longer nights. Lieutenant General Richard Halden and Rear Admiral Samuel Keene remain part of the picture, but the center of it is process done right and a Marine who honored the boundary. There are people who cannot tell the story of what they held together. Honor them anyway by noticing the work that leaves no headline and the habits that keep others safe. If this moved you, add your name to the small circle that keeps true service stories alive for the next listener. Avery leaves the building at the same measured pace she brought in. She will show up again at 2:30 p.m. or at 7:15 a.m. with the same tools she trusts. A clean uniform and a quiet mind. No applause follows and no complaint is offered. Only steady steps toward the next task and the next small proof that respect is restraint.